One of the cool things about growing up at the turn of the 20th century is we've gotten to witness the exploration of the final frontier, outer space. I don't know if you were like me when you were a kid, watching the TV, seeing the space shuttle lift off and saying, I want to be in that so bad. And you go to your teacher and you say, I want to be an astronaut when I grow up. She says, that's great, Tyler. You know, you live in America, it's a free country, you just take a lot of physics classes when you get to high school. You get to high school, you get a D- in your first physics class, and you just decide you want to study communication for the rest of your life. But there is hope, so don't worry. Through my research of the National Aeronautics and Space Administration, there are a lot of careers that you can do here on the ground that will take your experience above and beyond the stars. So we'll look at the history of NASA today, we'll look at some lesser known jobs at NASA, and finally we'll talk about what NASA is going to do in the future. So NASA does not really need an introduction. They started in 1958 and put a man on the moon by 1969. In 1977, they launched Voyager 1 into space, and
Thank you.
And in 1977, they launched Voyager 1 into space, and 35 years later, it is still transmitting data back from 11 billion miles away. I don't know about you, but I think that's a really impressive track record. Who's responsible for this? Well, as of 2012, NASA's website tells us that 60% of the employees at NASA are engineers or physicists. But there's 40% that's 40% of the jobs at NASA that we can do. So one is related to my field of study, which is psychology. In a 2010 interview with PBS, NASA psychologist Al Holland told them a little bit about what he does. That includes selecting astronauts based on personality, because we don't want to put a hot-headed person into space in a tiny room they can't get out of, and also training those astronauts to live in those tiny spaces. I think that's awesome, because it is. He actually was an advisor during the 2010 Chilean minor crisis. Maybe some of you remember that. So he actually got to use that experience not only at NASA, but elsewhere. You don't have to have a degree to train astronauts, though. NASA has this massive swimming pool, and they hire tons of certified divers to go into this big swimming pool and train with the astronauts in a simulated microgravity environment. And that's what I think is really cool, actually. And a lot of you are going to go into public relations or sales and marketing. That's really, really important to NASA. One, because science is extremely complex, and two, that's our tax dollars that are going to that complex science. So if people don't understand those tax dollars, they could go elsewhere. And even with these great scientific accomplishments that I've mentioned, NASA's budget has been on the decline over the last about 40 years. The U.S. Office of Management and Budget lists the 2012 NASA budget at $18 billion, which is a lot of money, but also the 7th lowest by government administration. There's still going to be some great things that NASA's going to do with that money, though. One of them, or we can put those into 3 parts. The first is deep space exploration. And a recent Time magazine article, It's Alive, the greatest telescope ever survives. Journalist Michael Lumenick talks about this new telescope. It's called the James Webb Telescope, and NASA wants to put it into orbit by 2018. So this telescope is, unlike the Hubble telescope that we've seen so many great space pictures with now, that's 300 miles orbiting the Earth. This one's actually going to orbit 1 million miles away from the Earth. So it's one that's going to put some really incredible pictures, but two, if it breaks, there's no fixing it. So really hoping that this telescope is going to be all good. The second thing is the International Space Station. They'd like to continue working on that, make it functional for at least another 20 years, and through that they will do experiments and test equipment in space, which will lead to their third and final mission, would be to put a man on Mars by the 2030s. So we've talked a little bit about some great accomplishments that NASA's made, some of the great people that work for NASA, and some of the great things they're going to do in the future. Thank you for your time, and if there's any questions, I'll open up the floor.
What department would you like to work for at NASA?
The department? Probably it would be human resources, as far as astronaut selection and personality training goes. It's not just limited to human resources, as I said, with Al Holland. He he does a ton of administrative work as far as selecting and training. So kind of, I'd like to be more on the behavioral part of training astronauts and teaching them how to go to space rather than selecting the astronauts. So.
Why do you think we should spend so much money exploring space when 70% of the ocean is still unexplored?
Because they're important. That's a great question, Mr. Biology major. We're not going to find aliens in the ocean, am I right? We need to be looking elsewhere for aliens. That's my big thing. And we can't live in the ocean either. Though it would be great if we had underwater what?
As it says.
I know, that's right. I would love to make an underwater tent, but we already have the technology. We can just keep working there. Yes?
Do you think that there's a possibility of us living in space someday?
I really do. I don't know about us, but maybe I think our grandkids definitely could as soon as the technology has been made more readily available. Because like Apple, they make all of their equipment and test it too. So.
Okay, granted we had all the money and like technological capabilities. Where would you, like specifically like you, fly to next?
Where would
Like
I
any
fly to?
planet, galaxy, whatever.
Ooh, that is a great question. I have to look. There is a. I'd probably go to Pluto, just because it's so underrated and I want people to remember.
And we're going to have to stop there. Thank you, Tyler. Nice job.